Hi there, welcome to the halftime huddle. I had a little bit of a break for a couple of weeks where we spent some time with the family, but it's great to be back, and I'm looking forward to today's conversation. For those people who sort of stumbled across this by accident, this is the halftime huddle. It's an opportunity halfway through the week to hit pause, reflect, get ready for the second half. We do this through oftentimes, and luckily today, it's a great opportunity by having conversations with people who are going through the same sort of challenges as you're going through. Business owners who are getting through the week and gives an opportunity to share what they do and share how they get through the week and some of the things, so you can understand that you're not the only one there. It's Mark Webb from A Game Masterminds. And today we've got someone who brings an artistic, creative twist to what we're talking about. She's an artist, an art therapist, and host of a great podcast called A New Pace. So do check it, and I'm sure we'll talk about it as we go through. So without further ado, I'll just like to say hello, Lesley Andrew. How are you?
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm really good. Thank you.
Good, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad we sort of had this opportunity to have a chat, and I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit about all of the things you do. And generally, like I said, we'll start with your origin story. I love to hear how people got to where they get to where they're doing, why they do what they do, and how their journey has meandered away to where they are. So basically, why do you do what you do, Lesley? What's your origin
Yeah.
story?
Yeah. So I'm an artist and an art therapist, and I've often sort of lent in and out of those two things. I used to be an art teacher, so art's always been sort of part of me. Somebody once said that it seems like I sort of bleed paint. And so I suppose at the core is art, and art's always been there. And so that sort of led me into the natural sort of sense of being a teacher. I was an art teacher for 11 years. And it got to the point where I love teaching. The majority of the time I love teaching, but I needed something more. And I felt a bit like there was some things where I was maybe needing to use art for my own self-care and for my own sort of my own healing. And I would often recommend art therapy to sixth formers or GCSE students who were looking at careers, especially if they studied art and psychology. And then at one point it clicked that actually that could be what I did. That could be something that I did. And I was really involved with, a lot of the well-being things in schools and social and emotional aspects of learning. So actually it felt like the natural thing for me to retrain as an art therapist, and that was 12 years ago. And stepping into that space of being in that role of an art therapist was a bit tricky at first, because there were certain things that I would do as an art teacher that would be maybe helping somebody to with a technique, and I was intentionally needing to lean back from that and have a completely different approach. And what I love about art therapy is that it can be accessible for anybody. Like, there's a lot of myths about art therapy just being for children or just being for people who struggle to communicate verbally. However, actually, it can be really helpful for all sorts of people navigating challenges, maybe anxious yet ambitious, maybe people that have gone through a loss or some kind of a separation, challenges at times, and being able to express themselves, which is at my core. Like, helping people to express themselves is so important to me, because sometimes people can feel really stuck and feel like they can't say the words that they need to say because it might feel too painful, or there might not be the right words. In art therapy, that there is often that stance of, when words fail, art is there and art steps in. And across over the years of being an art therapist, I've worked with children and families. I've worked in mental health services in the community and in hospitals, and worked with like people who have experienced a lot of early life experiences, early developmental trauma, including those that are adopted and fostered, maybe those that have got support from different places and need that extra bit of support. So some of that is involved working with parents as well as with the children and young people, and that's been really rewarding. And I suppose where I've been leaning more now is to work more with people who are at sort of more transition stages in their life. So one of the things about working with children and teenagers is that they're navigating a transition, especially teenagers. And my own experience of stepping into perimenopause, health challenges, different things like that, has made me appreciate adults' life transitions and how adults can really benefit from art therapy. And I use a combination of art therapy and confidence coaching to help people to just be able to express their true selves, like not just a sense of who they feel that they should be, but who they really are at the core, and step into being more confident about themselves. So it feels really good to be keeping with that and to use those techniques myself as well. I really appreciate that. And I can't believe the time's gone by, because I was an art teacher for the same amount of time now that I am an art therapist. So doesn't time go by? And all in all the way through, my like identity as an artist has remained strong. So if somebody was to say, "Oh, are you an artist or an art therapist, or is the teacher still there?" It's like artist. Yeah.
It's lovely to hear your journey, and I love the way that uh, oftentimes exactly what you were suggesting in your story. You almost stumble on to what you'll do in the thing. You start off with one idea. In an artist, you say you're an artist, and then you go into helping others become artists by teaching, and then you come into stumble along to helping others with their life transitions through art. So it's nice that to hear that kind of transition, and the way people's journeys are never really straight and linear. They always have a back and forth, and I presume you find that when you talk to some of your customers.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes people think that there may be one challenge is the thing, and it actually turns out to be other things. So it turns out to be maybe like there's certain blocks that are maybe blocking the way, certain things that they feel quite stuck about. And actually, when they're able to see things from a different perspective, whether it's using visual arts or another form of creativity, they can start to see things in a way that maybe is somewhat different, and start to kind of, maybe the fog lifts a little bit. And I like that metaphor as someone who's experienced a lot of brain fog, like at this perimenopause stage. A lot of brain fog is often kind of maybe associated with hormones, or associated with like lots of different things. But from a sort of mental health perspective, there's lots of things that can cause that brain fog, or that kind of numbness and that stuckness and that blurriness, that we can't see the wood for the trees. And having someone to work with can make a big difference, that can actually like provide that space to look in a different way.
I love that, and you sort of skirted away about the different creative media you can use. I would imagine. What sort of what do you find is the easiest and more approachable and accessible to people when they're in this sort of situation generally?
Um, Everyone's different. It depends purely, which you probably imagine that as the answer. But yeah, um, you get people who, like, I get kind of referrals from people who already are into art, and maybe there's an expectation that art therapy will be helpful because they're already very creative. And in some ways, they might have certain ideas about what to make. They might already have some technical skills and a degree of accuracy by sort of Western standards as to what good art might be. And they might be leaning towards a certain thing. However, someone that's not made any art for a long, long time might be quite cautious about where to start. and they might look to me to say, well, what shall I do? And more often than not, it's that invitation to say, well, it doesn't matter what it looks like in the end. Have that space to test out something. You could. I keep doing this with my hands, moving my hands back and forward, as though it's like I could have bits of chalk in my hands now, and on the paper, and that could be a way that someone could test out a certain material. And then after they've been maybe using a material that feels safe to use because it's familiar, they might then start to use some other things, and that can maybe represent them maybe feeling more confident about the sessions, and really good for anxiety, because often anxiety kind of causes people to want to stay safe, so, and maybe not go into the unknown. So if somebody can feel that they can step out of their comfort zone with choosing to use paint, for instance, or like a different type of pen, or something that might be less predictable, then they can actually trust themselves a little bit more. So it's purely dependent. There's lots of different ideas about certain materials being maybe calming and certain materials being activating and energizing. And that's purely, again, it's dependent on what. So many different options, Mark, really.
And I would imagine. I mean, I know from experience. There are times when you, you, I mean, everybody has well, most people have an option to experiment and use art at schools,
Yeah.
and they take it to whatever levels they can do depending on their skills. But there are some times when people find, like you say, the idea of perfection as in the Western way of creating art sometimes gets in the way of them being more creative, and then often during the school time that stops them doing art. So how do you find that, getting over that kind of block in someone when they've been told they're not very good at art, they can't draw lines, they can't, all that kind of stuff sometimes gets in the way. How does that come across?
It's really common, especially for adults, that would say, "Oh no, I can't do that. I can't. I'm just not a creative person." And these are these sorts of entrenched messages that I think we get when as we're growing up. We start to, when we're very little, we're open to doing anything, even if we're not very good at it. And then as we get older, there's maybe a message that, well, maybe stop doing gymnastics because you're not very coordinated or balanced, and actually then that message is, well, I can only do it if I'm good. And then as we become teenagers, we sort of have to select our like subjects for school based on whether we're good or not. And I like to say, well, choose things that you enjoy rather than what you're good at. However, that's really entrenched, isn't it, as an adult? And I've been guilty of the same sorts of things. So I would say, well, I'm not very logical because I'm creative, I'm not very logical. So part of my mission to help other people to unlock their creativity, and that message that anybody can express themselves and hold space for people to express themselves freely. Part of that narrative is me being able to step out of my comfort zone in other things. So choosing to be more disciplined, and choosing to be more logical, and choosing to have more routines. And in many ways, that work that's really hard. It feels like hard work. However, actually, that's one way that I can make sense of my message to other people, that everybody's creative. If I'm not doing the opposite, if I'm not kind of then going, okay, oh, I'm just not good with numbers. Well, we have this capacity for growth and change and development, and a lot of how we improve depends on our desire for it, and we wanting to learn. So I was just saying to somebody the other day, I wish I played a musical instrument, and I say that. However, I don't wish that I'd spent hours and hours and hours learning. It would be nice if I could play, but all the way through sort of my life, I've never really chosen to spend hours like playing. Like I've got a ukulele, but I don't really practice. So yeah, it's that kind of thing of maybe catching that messy middle part where you're starting to use art and creativity more. However, it's not necessarily looking like you'd want it to look, and that's where more recently and more I'm starting to kind of go, well, okay, well, I've had to put the art teacher me aside in order to help people as an art therapist to to keep that line clear. However, actually a lot of people that I'm working with now who are genuinely wanting to express themselves can express themselves better if I help them with something technical, not necessarily a full on art lesson, but overcoming some technical block can generally help somebody to express themselves better. It's a
And
bit of it all.
no, and I love that, and I love the idea, and very much what we do here. You talked about the messy middle. Very much what the halftime huddle is about. In this instance, it's the messy middle of the week, and often I could well believe that the messy middle is the time when people they've got over the initial beginner's luck type thing, and they're in the bit where they're trying to do stuff that's complicated and hard and giving up. And I love the way that you say, your job in that instance is to help give them the skills to carry on, rather than necessarily the encouragement to do it. It's about skilling them up during the messy middle, where they're hitting technical challenges rather than creative challenges, which I love. I love that sort of twist between the initial creativity of starting, and then you hit the technical challenges, and then from then onwards, I imagine after the messy middle, you're back into a bit more creativity. Is that what you experience?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel like it can definitely feel like that, and I think everybody's maybe artists are naturally quite judgmental on themselves. That would be very critical of ourselves. That the more you know, the more you kind of realize that you don't know like that. And it reminds me of a time, this idea of being a beginner and having that beginner's mindset and actually it being fun being a beginner. And then you get to a point where it starts to get hard because you're working through some stuff. And for art therapy, that might be working through some challenging emotions and processing some thoughts and feelings. For because I see a range of people. Some people who it's very much about the creativity, and some people that it's about processing a particular thing and working through those things. But that idea of having that beginner's mindset reminds me of a time I was doing archery for the first time, or it was a beginner's lesson. And this guy who was the archery instructor, and this is stuck with me, it's about 7 years ago. He said, "A minute to learn, a lifetime to master." And I love the idea of that because we could fire these arrows within seconds. We could fire those arrows within seconds. It might not necessarily be going where we wanted it to go, but we could feel that we were doing the archery task. And it can feel like that with art. And I think this is how children appear to find things easy because they are a beginner. Like with everything in life, they're a beginner. Um, and I was just really struck by that as a message because it was that sense of, well done, you've done really well. However, if you wanted to master this, then it's going to take you a lot of discipline and a lot of time. And then it is that thing of, well, how much time am I committed to do this? So it's maybe that difference between being a professional artist and painting things in a certain way that you wanting to paint, and being like, you could, I don't know, there's so many different variables with it. It's not a direct parallel. However, I feel like it's a good way of kind of seeing it.
No, no, I can well see that, and I can see that especially. And when we talk about, I mean, you talk about art therapy. Sorry, I've got a tickle in my throat.
No, it's all right.
The therapy bit, when you hit, initially, if you think about beginning and exploring the medium, exploring the idea, exploring the process, and then you hit sort of the idea of, actually, how does that relate to the individual part of the therapy. And it's the same, like I would imagine it's the same with being an artist. It's the same with me being, right. You talk about doing this for 12 years, running a business, the same sort of thing. It's the initial excitement of getting out there and providing the service or doing the thing you do is exciting. And then you get into the thing, well, I need to know this, I need to know that. And when, like you said, I've loved your attitude of, I've told myself I'm not very good with numbers, but just like people have told themselves they're not very good at art. So maybe it's a it's a message that I should challenge, and go do something different about it. And it's the same with business. I'm not very good at business. I'm not very good at sales. I'm not very good at X, Y, Z. And I love that sort of opportunity to challenge that and think, well, why not try? Why not just have a go?
Mm.
And I can see that getting that experience using art and art therapy can spin off into, like exactly what you said in terms of numbers, spin off into other areas of your life where you think, well, I've been telling myself for years I'm not good at art, but I'm doing art. I'm doing art therapy. I'm helping myself through creativity. So maybe the messages I'm telling myself in other areas are also things I can challenge. Do you find
Yeah.
that kind of happens or changes when you meet people who've been doing it
Yeah.
for a while?
Oh yeah, and it makes me think about what I was saying about the materials that people use. So sometimes you could get somebody that maybe wants a rubber, for instance, and I might not have got one that day. Or I know some art therapists that never provide rubbers, and the idea is that it helps somebody to sort of tolerate that frustration of, like, they're not being a mistake, but they're being happy accidents. And there's different ways to see this. On one hand, there might be somebody that can tolerate that level of frustration and distress, and then on, like, somebody might not be able to, and it might be absolutely necessary to walk back down the corridor to where we're going, and or to just, like, provide an alternative, come up with some solution, because that person might really really struggle in terms of their mental health, not having that. And we're talking kind of complete different people, everyone's different, but that idea of being able to cope, maybe if there's a drip of paint and there's extra water to what you expected, and it's maybe, or you coloured outside the line or something like that, that actually on one hand it can feel like somebody might feel a real frustration about that, and the same thing could happen, and they, within a second, they could feel that liberation and that freedom of it. And those two things can exist at the same time, much like that freedom and security. There's dialectics of having an acceptance of where you are at the same time as looking towards the change and improvements. And but yeah, there's so many different things of, a lot of it, this fits in with having that growth mindset. And for some people, they may be really stuck, not necessarily stuck because their mindsets, like fixed, but in terms of their nervous system, or in terms of their life experiences, that they might need, like, that gentle, subtle push, that subtle thing. So sometimes people can work in art therapy for a number of weeks or a number of months, and it feeling that maybe they're doing a lot of the same things, sort of repeating the same things, and it can feel like, or they're expressing art in, like, themselves in different ways, and it can feel like really challenging at times for them. Yeah, but then that's maybe building up some frustration, some distress tolerance.
No, and I like the way that 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 because a case in point, my wife and I, and she's left a comment and a message about the same sort of thing. We started a stained glass course a couple of weeks back, and the cutting the glass we'd done before, so we knew some of the techniques and exactly what you're saying about techniques. But there was one technique, the soldering technique, that's messy and blobby, and like you say, you're talking about the paint dripping, the solder's dripping in the wrong place, and it's frustrating, and it's getting to come to cope with that and getting over the frustration of not being able to do it right. Helps us move on to the next stage. And like I said, I hadn't thought about it until you'd mentioned it now there, and she'd mentioned it in the comment that even that, and we're not doing it as therapy, we're doing it as fun, is a therapeutic type process, because you're getting used to not being able to do things and getting used to the frustration of things not going the way they should be, but in a creative, in a safe, and in an area that isn't isn't life or death, or losing money this way, or happen things go wrong. Which I think is that the similar sort of feeling you get when people are working with you in therapy.
Yeah, and when you're saying about the something going wrong, what I often like say rather than that, or I catch myself if I like that's in my head, or I might say, oh, it's gone wrong, and I might say, oh, has it not gone according to plan, sort of thing. So it's not that it hasn't gone wrong, it's just not gone according to plan. So actually, like Bob Ross, or like artist Bob Ross always said, like, there's no mistakes, only happy accidents. And actually I always had that from my art teacher as well. And at the end of the day, this is maybe more about the intention of what you're doing and how you're starting to make something. So what you said, Mark, about the stained glass like process, that could be very different if you've got a set design that you wanting to follow and your set kind of pattern. Whereas if you're making something and you maybe don't have a plan, then there's in some ways there's scope to experiment a little bit more. However, actually some people find that just there's not much containment with that. So having some structure with then some leeway can work really well. But it fits with loads of different things in life, doesn't it? Of like having a plan or not having a plan. And if you haven't got a plan, is it good to go with the flow? Does someone enjoy going with the flow without a plan? Or does somebody else might prefer to have a plan for their holiday, for instance? Or are they okay to not have a plan? But then if they have a plan and it goes wrong, then that might be a disaster, or then catastrophizing about things, and the inner critic might sort of step in and say all sorts of things. So it's that balance, and having a balance is hard.
Absolutely, and very much so. Like I suggested, this is an opportunity in the middle of the week to discuss, what it's like to be a businessman, or business person. Sorry, stepping in, and the challenges you face day to day, and going through things, and I'm loving the what I can see is the similarity between the process of going through creative endeavors, as well as going through the routine of getting from A to B, from Monday to Friday in a working week, or etc., and the messy middle of where we are in the middle of the week, and I'm loving sort of these kind of metaphors, or this similarity. But when you talk about the plan, you're sitting there. Some people love to make a plan at the beginning of the week.
Yeah.
Midweek, generally the plan goes a little bit awry. Even if the best laid plans of mice and men, as they say, generally in the middle of the week you have to course correct, whatever you want to call it. And those people who like to go with the flow, and I love the way that it sounds to me that art therapy is a great way to a place as well to experiment with different modes of of working is a bit more, a bit different modes of being. Are
Yeah.
you are you a planner, or are you a flower, sort of, whatever you call it? And in I would imagine in the way you work with other people is you can give them a chance to experiment with slightly other ways of doing things, and how it feels, and exploring that.
Mm.
Is that also something that comes across when you're dealing with people, and a chance to, like you say, experiment with a slightly different way of doing things?
Mm. I think when I first became a therapist, and this applies to when I was first being a teacher, I would really, really plan and I'd work out, I'd have themes maybe, and I'd have like sometimes have like worksheets, and I'd maybe like do a lot of research and all those sorts of things about different ideas, and actually differently with both. But after, getting to know, getting to know people, ultimately showing up and meeting somebody and like finding out where they're at, how they come into the session, and providing and facilitating, providing some materials or providing a space is what's what the planning is. And and sometimes I've kind of found that some people like to have some structure. Um they like to know what they're doing, what they're going to be working on. However, the majority of people that I've worked with might feel a little bit unsure at first. However, actually being given maybe just a few prompts or suggestions might be sufficient, because then they've found, oh, I quite like it when I've created something and then, oh, something unexpected happened, and then I'm making this link with something, or going with that. And I think a lot of the time, my planning was about me rather than about them, and about me wanting to be as good a therapist as I can be for that person, not wanting to let them down, and wanting to have a good use of the session. So it's something that I would generally ask people about, how much structure you want in to have, or does a lot of structure help? Does more flexibility help? And sometimes just giving them that option can can lead to more flexibility in itself. That, oh, I'd quite like some structure, but then it's maybe that containment of that session, that reassurance that structure is possible. If you get stuck, sort of inverted commas, then it's okay. You can navigate through that. Mm.
And I like you again, your transformation from what we all start off with, a desire to support people by bringing as much as you can to help them, because you don't know what's going on, you don't know what
Yeah,
they might need at that time, and then to moving to help you feel more comfortable about being able to support them, and then through to falling back and saying, it's not about me, it's about them. So my comfort about whether I've got all the stuff is not necessarily as important as their comfort and their. And it's just similar. I would imagine it's a similar process you go through when you're in business, when you're starting to provide things for other people. You start
yeah,
off by giving everything, the whole kitchen sink, the whole this, that, and the other, and then you start to pull back and say, what, it's not about me, it's about them, and what do they need, and how I help with their.
yeah. That's true. Because I think when I've like, you know created offers, when I've put things out there to support people, I've often kind of thought, oh, could I have this? Could I have that? Could I have like some digital content? Could I have all these things? And then actually, people have found them useful, but essentially it's been more about the direct contact. Those like that's maybe the bit, and the connections, and that direct support has been maybe what people have found useful. Because I have digital standalone courses, and then I've got I do one to one and then groups. And I suppose in reflection, I think this idea of going, oh, we do this, and really dissecting it was about my sort of confidence in promotion of it, not necessarily in the delivering of it, because I've been delivering those services for years, but it's just a very different format, doing it as kind of more as a business. And that, as being able to sort of lean back and like let go of the me part and really think more about my clients, and which is the sort of bread and butter really of art therapy. And it's all of these things come and go. That's actually making me help people better. I'm getting out of my head a little bit and practicing what I preach a little bit more.
Which, like I said, I can see how again, with a similar sort of similarity that you know, we pull away from the discomfort of not knowing and not being able to do things because it's all new. Generally, most people when they start a business, even if they've got a particular skill that they know is saleable, to customers, there's a lot of stuff around it that is out of their experience, and it's all difficult and strange, and they resort to doing things that other people have told them to do, or they think they ought to do, or etc., rather than pulling back and letting the customer direct them in terms of what they need. And like I said, and I love the fact that you pulled on your experience as a therapist over the time to realize that and recognize that, rather than forever trying to think about I'm putting things into place that I know I can do, rather than delivering what I know will help them.
Yeah, it's tricky because I think you're right that actually it's so easy to just hear all the different advice as a business owner and just think, oh, I should be doing that, or is that worth doing, or maybe I'll stop doing that, and then like stop being consistent about things. And when it comes to sort of plans or going with the flow, I feel a bit like I need a plan, but I like to go with the flow. So there's a conflict, and I think when I've got scheduled things in my diary, and when I structure things, my diary is all color coded, as you can imagine. when I've got appointments with people like allocated, and not necessarily being busier, but when I've got set times, then things do flow better, because then I like the time in between is better. And when I listen to my intuition more and look within and trust myself more, then I'm more likely to take the action on all of the little stepping stone things. So like things that I've not necessarily say if I was doubting myself that I might not do. So certain kind of bits that I can't think of an example. I can't even think of an example of like the little bits that can sometimes feel like, why am I doing that? But when you do it and when it's all in place, then it can feel like nice. It's a bit like a piece of a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah.
That each individual jigsaw puzzle might not seem relevant, and then when you put it in, it's kind of now that flows. Whereas at times when I was doubting how to sort of run my business, and I was maybe in rooms where people were often the smallest fish in the big pond kind of, and then listening to this advice that's up here, and then maybe not taking action on the smaller things. So because it's, oh, I don't need to do that because I'm getting advice from this higher one. But essentially, I think that's derailed me a little bit over the time I've been doing this self-employed. So it's the message to just trust myself more, practice what I preach, and like not overthink it. Easier said than done, I know, but
oh, absolutely, very much, and it's and you're right, it is very very easy to and it's not necessarily wrong, but it's very easy to get encouraged by the people who have gone before and have done things and have made made impression in certain areas to follow their lead, because they've been there, they've done that, they're the trail guides, as you call it. But sometimes you're making your own trail, so you have to be aware that the journey that took them to where they are isn't necessarily the journey will take you to where you want to go. But it's hard not to do that, especially in the beginning times when you don't have necessarily the confidence, because through experience of doing the things that you do for your business, but you also don't know. There's so much you don't know when you start a business.
Yeah.
It's very easy to fall into line with someone who's leading you in a particular direction, with they're hard worn. I mean, none of these people have not done. They've been on their own journey. They've walked the walk. They're now talking the talk, but sometimes the talk isn't necessarily your talk.
Yeah.
And that can be hard not to get enticed into that. And it takes time, and it takes encouragement, and it takes confidence, and it also takes interacting with other people and dealing with other people, and talking to other people about that. Yeah, I mean, how do you? I mean, we met over networking.
Yeah.
How do you interact with others? Is that your main way of talking to other business people, or do you have a community or group or anything like that you spend time with?
Yeah. So I mean, I used to like really struggle with networking, and I think I've always been quite a sociable person, and to go along and kind of chat to people, that part's fine. But I think I'd struggle to maybe share my expertise and really talk about what I do in my business. And as I've sort of gone to more events, online and in person, I've used it as a way of practicing talking about what I do, and use it as a way of genuinely connecting with people. So because the impression that I've sort of maybe had out my own sort of own judgment is that there's a lot of people trying to sort of pitch to each other, and it depends purely on where you're going. Some networking events are really fun and can feel like games and things. Other ones it can feel like a bit like everyone is everyone's ideal client in some ways. So I found them hard. However, the more I've been to, and the more the in-person events I've really liked, and liking, like there's some events up in Leeds where like in-person events, and sometimes it feels like really relaxed and like talking to your mates, like your business buddies. And other times it's like you take the laptop along and do some co-working with people, and they're the types of ones that I really like. And getting involved with different people, there's lots of different Facebook groups that I'm in, like especially with sort of women in business. So it feels like I have to sort of step out of my comfort zone a little bit sometimes to show up as my best self. However, when I'm not feeling my best, I'll just be saying, "Oh, actually, I'm feeling a bit wobbly. Is anyone else like that?"
Mm.
And I think sometimes people have seen me as being quite refreshing. That I kind of introduced myself. Like once I introduced myself as an artist with an identity crisis, and they're like, "Oh," and they're like, "Actually, you're showing up better today, talking about it like that than you were when you were feeling, quite robotic, talking about it in how you think that you should talk." So it's been quite fun actually. Like if I were to look back over the last year of networking, yeah, there's different. Yeah, it's still me, but you're seeing a bit of a learning in public, shall we say?
Yes, no, and you are right. There are different types of networking out there, different types of opportunities to spend some time with other people in business, sharing, pitching, encouraging, educating, and just being with people. I think is good, and I'm glad that you've excuse me, sorry everybody who's listening to me coughing and spluttering on the on this, but I'm glad you've got yourself through that, because like you say, it can be a bit daunting walk, especially in public or face-to-face meetings. It can be a bit daunting to walk into a room full of other people, and
Yeah,
full of other people who are who are can seem like they've already got groups. If you're one of the last ones in, then people are sort of settled in little groups, and cutting into an established conversation can feel a little bit sort of hard for those people who are not used to it. So it's an experience, and it's something that takes a bit of time doing. And I'm glad you find that it's helped and you've moved it through, because it's lonely running your business on your own. And if you and you really do need, and I'm talking as encouragement to everybody out there, you really do need to find some people out there who you can interact with. You talked about the co-working. We run co-working at our place. It's online virtually, so it's slightly different sort of feel. But you need to make connections with people. You can't. It's just so hard running a business on your own unless you have other people to make connections with. And I'm glad you seem to have come through that and found that.
It's true, and I think I'll have to check out some of those co-working spaces. But one of the things that, well, I was thinking about sort of the business networking connections, as well as the connecting with like other art therapists and other
Mm.
therapists. And that's really valuable because art therapists can often feel like maybe the only one art therapist in that organization, or like it's really common for that to happen, or isolated in some other way. Like we've got a very different language or different way of
Mhm.
talking and doing the therapy and being with the therapy. So I'm really involved with like BAT, British Association of Art Therapy, and at the moment I'm one of the special interest group coordinators. So as part of that, there's like sessions online, as well as we did an in-person one in February, where that was very much art making and space to reflect, and like being able to fill our own cups is
Mhm.
really important. So actually, whilst I'm sort of coordinating it and facilitating the groups, it is that opportunity to reflect and be in your art therapist tribe. I don't know what a group collective noun of for art therapist group is, but
A
I'm sure
palette. Maybe
somebody
it's a
knows.
palliative art therapist or something.
Oh, I like that. Oh, yeah, I like that palette of art therapists. Yeah. Oh, because then you can create all sorts of things from that.
Yes, you can. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That's you. But you know, I love that idea, and definitely. In the environments I used to work in corporate, we used to have what we call communities of practice, which were
Mm,
groups of people doing the same sort of thing. You'd have um, um, business coaches all talking together. You'd have project leaders all talking together and going through, sharing their experiencing, supporting each other, sharing best practices, helping them with new techniques and new tools and sort of that kind of stuff you don't get to do when you're running on your own. Like you say, if you're the
yeah.
only art therapist in the in the environment or the place that you work, then knowing what to do and how to do things, it's great to learn off other people's experience. So yeah, so it's definitely I get again you get my vote for those kind of special interest or communities of practice type groups where where you can share best practices and all that kind of stuff. But it's also good to be in an environment where people are slightly outside of
Yeah.
your environment, because they can offer an alternative that you might not think, or a group of you together might get sucked into, this is the way we do it, this is the way we've always done it, where someone from the outside might say, well, have you tried X? And you would have been in that little loop that you might have stepped out of. So both are really useful and really important for small
Yeah.
businesses to
Yeah,
be
it's good.
amongst a group of common business owners and also separate business owners, or common practitioners and separate practitioners. So yeah,
Yeah.
so it's great that you have that as well, and that background. And again, standing on my soapbox, I would encourage everybody who's listening to this to find the same. If you can, there must be somewhere. And if you can't find it, then that's an opportunity for you to make it. If there isn't one around, create one.
Yeah. You know what? Like, I mean, at the moment, there's so much around, like, talking about AI and
Mm.
kind of things being artificial and sort of a loneliness pandemic, people being really, really disconnected from other people. And I think, over the years, that's like different reasons why that's happened. And actually, with AI, it just highlights the need for connection, doesn't it? And highlights
Yeah.
the need for authenticity and mistakes. I was watching a video earlier about, I think it was some AI speaking training. There was an AI bot modeling what it's like to talk like this, and then they had when you've done the training, they had a different AI bot going, and you will do this, and telling people how to speak. And I'm all for sort of speaking training. However, the irony of it was that it was just this AI bot. And it made me think, well, I don't want to be speaking without my ums and ahs. In fact, I'm going to add extra ums and ahs to prove that I'm human. I'm going to be more authentic to myself. I don't want to ever, if it gets to the point where somebody starts to think, is she AI or is she human? Like, if I get to that point where I've, polished speeches and articulate enough for someone to question that, then yeah, put me back into the kind of talking gobbledygook, because that is so much better for fun and connection and humanness, and
Absolutely.
like in
Absolutely.
my book, more so in this day and age.
No, no, you're very right. AI is great in certain areas. It's great for helping you with ideas. It's great for analyzing loads of data. It's great for a lot of things that potentially would get in the way, or get in the way of you doing what you provide. But in terms of connection, there's nothing that beats human connection, and there's nothing that beats, like you say, a couple of ums and ahs and a couple of stumbles and a couple of mispronunciations or whatever it is. That's what glues us together, and that's what helps us evolve and grow and make connections. And you're right. So I mean, one of the things
Yeah.
I love to do this live rather than edit is because I like the ums and ahs. I like the mistakes. I like the idea of not being polished, like you say. I like the idea of the way that the conversation goes, and because it does feel stilted when you take out all the ums and ahs, when you take out. I mean, there isn't something. It's something, like you say, artificial.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
that's why I like to do this live, and I do very little editing at the end of it when it goes out. Some of it because it's not the same with without um the the double. I mean, I have a tendency to and which is one of the interesting things when you look back at things. I have a tendency to sort of stutterish, where I repeat. I mean, I've just did it there. I repeat things, but that's who I am, and that's how I speak, and I don't want to take that away from me, because that's me. Um, and
Yeah, absolutely. And when we can get into flow and get past those things, and yeah, maybe not be too sort of caught up about ourselves, but maybe about the conversation and the bigger picture, then that's when we probably don't really mind the ums, and we don't mind the ahs, and don't mind if there's technical issues and things like that, or if your label sticking out or things like that. You did a podcast and I did have a label sticking out, and I kept going like that, and then I realized I was in reverse and I needed to go like that, and I kept going like this. And what would have been better is if I'd have just quickly gone like that, and it would have like been sorted within like seconds. So there'll be, and then but it was that side because it was the reverse on the camera, but it didn't matter. It's just it distracted me. So it did, like, nobody else would notice. I mean, you told the entire internet now, so they'll be looking
and
for it.
yeah, they're all going to
But
go back and have a look at which is another thing we haven't talked about, your podcast, and I would encourage people
yeah,
to check it out. It's on Spotify, is that right?
yeah. So I think it's on like some other like platforms for podcasts as well. Um, I don't know. There's so many different ones, isn't there? And I put some videos on YouTube to do with it as well. So it's very it's quite it's a new podcast really. It's early days coming into like speaking with people, but it's a long standing one. So I first started, or the idea was the seed was planted in 2021. So we're talking 4 years at least, and it had a different name then. It was, oh, it's changed its name 3 times for various reasons. The first time it was called Creative. I was doing creative and active, and that was the important thing, like, being creative and active. And then I shifted. Maybe only did a couple of episodes, and then I wanted to kind of restart it, and then it was Hikatapi, hiking art therapy, and I couldn't say it. I could barely say it myself, and so then it wasn't very podcast proof. So then I abandoned that, and then we went with a new pace. So and the whole thing with that is like pace being about pause, act, create, and empower, and stepping into a new pace, like those life transitions where you may be having to do things differently, where you may be having to maybe lean back, and you might not have as much energy as you did before, or you might be like really struck by something happening in your life and really affected emotionally by it. So being able to strike that balance of pausing and then taking action, and then the creation comes in, and like anything that feels that you're making choices in your life can feel empowering. So that this idea of having guests on the podcast means that there's more sort of richer conversations. It's not just me talking, which it doesn't need to be a podcast for that, I suppose. That's part of the thing. I could make a video and it doesn't need to be podcast. So I've had about 5 guests so far, which I'm really pleased about so far, and all very, very different, and some creative, some more sort of mindset things. Everyone's been brilliant and very patient with me navigating technology as well, and like working out, not just trying. We are doing it. I say we. It's just me. And then my guests kind of been very patient with me. So the one that's out today is to do with like mental endurance one.
Oh, brilliant.
So when we were talking about the kind of, learning things and that mindset of that fits really well with what we've been talking about, as well as the pace model of feeling empowered and like. But yeah, my intention is to carry on bringing guests in.
Yeah.
And I am looking for guests that are maybe like that can resonate with that idea of taking time to pause and then aligned action, and what creativity means to one person might mean something completely different to someone else. So someone that doesn't do art, crafts, creativity might be more about problem solving or more about creating the life that they desire. Thing.
Oh, brilliant! So definitely sounds a great resource, a great thing to look at. So I will definitely I'll put a link in the comments below as well. But if not, you can find it by going to Spotify, or, as you say, whatever podcast channel you use, and searching for A New Pace.
A New Pace.
Yeah, brilliant. So do have a listen to that. Which is brilliant. I'm conscious that we've been chatting for a long time, and I'm pretty certain we could chat for ages. But I do want to get to one thing that well, there's 2 things. As I said when we were in the pre-conversation talk, I like to hear about tips and tricks and stuff to how you keep your going through the week. But I think we've covered a lot of that over what you talk about anyhow. But one other thing is a book resource. I always ask someone to suggest a book that they have recommended to other people. So I'd love to hear what your book is.
So I'm in the middle of reading a book called The Big Leap at the moment, and I don't want to get the name. It's called Guy Hendrickson. It's either Hendrickson or Henderson. I feel really bad to not have it right. However, what I love about this book is that it talks about um, what stops us from reaching our, like, there being these upper limits, and whenever there's maybe a challenge or whenever there's something that happens, how that can be seen as like an upper limit problem.
Uh-huh.
and and he was saying that he pronounced it as up, like ULP, like gulp, like
Yeah.
up. So if you're like coming across something, it might be that you're about to come on the halftime huddle, and then you suddenly get a cough or something, and your throat goes or something, and you can't do it. And is that, he was saying that you could reflect on that as an upper limit problem, or it might be something else that you've maybe slept in or something, or you've not set things up sufficiently to go and do something. And he was seeing that that's an upper limit problem. There's all sorts of different solutions and like ways that these upper limit issues sort of come in, and what that meaning might be. And sometimes it's about not wanting to shine brighter than other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really resonates. I am halfway through it, so if anyone has read it, don't give me any spoilers because I'm working through it. But I would, yeah, definitely recommend, because I think at whatever level you're at, we all have these limitations where we might think about, it might kind of look like self-sabotaging or imposter syndrome or wherever it is. And he was, I mean, he was talking about it, just being present in any aspect of life, not just business, but anywhere. It could be like your physical health or relationships or anything. So
No,
it's called The Big Leap.
I will check that out, and again I'll put that in the link. But it sounds like a great book, and I love the, and I can understand and resonate with the idea of you get to a particular level, and you think that's your level, whereas really, you don't know what your level is until you push past that level, and that's pushing past that level, like I said, is where you find the hesitations and the coughing and the self sabotage and the stuff to keep you into the area where your mindset knows that you can cope with. It doesn't know how far up you can cope with, so it's uncomfortable and nervy, so it tries to pull you down.
Yeah, he talks about the zone of genius being up at the top, rather than you might be sitting in the zone of excellence, and that can feel
Uh-huh.
like you're doing well. You're doing well in that zone of excellence, and to an outsider, it could look like you're very successful. However, actually, that's become the comfort zone.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit awakening, really, eye opening. It's like calling me out on some of my stuff.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. So you're going to be stretching into your up into your upper limits. Well, brilliant. I'd love to see that, and thank you very much for that. As I said beforehand, and I say this often with everyone I talk to, because I love having these conversations. I could talk for hours, and I will try and pull you back on again. But it's been lovely talking to you. Where can people? I mean, apart from the new a new pace as podcast, where can they find out more about you, and where's the best place to connect with you?
So I'd probably say I am on LinkedIn. So you can send me a message on here, or you can message me. I've got some things on YouTube too, and I've got a Facebook group that I just ran a challenge in. So you can find me all over the place, really. I've got lots of things that are going on. So just look me up, Lesley Andrew, or yeah, a new pace.
Brilliant.
And actually, yeah, I'm all over the place.
Brilliant. I will again.
Omnipresent.
I'll put some of the links in, and again in the comments for people to find out more about you and say hi, because it's been great talking to you. I've loved the conversation, and I love to see more. So thank you very much for spending some time with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great. Really good to chat.
Thank you very much, Lesley. Just a little bit of a before we wave and say goodbye. I love these conversations. I hope you've enjoyed it. Learn more about Lesley by following the links, and check out the Big Leap book. We will be back again next week. I hope you have enjoyed this so far, and may your second half be your best half.